All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Inside In Tennis Podcast. This podcast available on all your platforms where you get your shows, as well as part of the Believe Network with a ton of outstanding content. We're back for another week of tennis, North American hardcourt swing. We've got a lot to get to. Citi Open in the rear view, Canada coming up, a lot of storylines in the pro game. And joining me now, friend of the show, we love having him on, former pro player, commentator, working in the business world as well, knows his stuff for sure. Happy to have him back on. Bradley Klahn. Bradley, welcome back to the show.
Mitch, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Love our conversations and looking forward to diving in on the North American summer. This was my favorite time of year.
I know, and I wanted to start there. Well, I was going to start with I got the quarter zip on. I wanted to dress up a little bit. You're in the business world, so we had to class it up a little bit. But yeah, this is your favorite time of year, and a lot of Americans, especially North Americans, love getting to this point of the year. But it goes without saying. I mean, you know this, but some of the fans maybe forget this. The season's brutally long. We're 7 months, 8 months in now. How did you, as a player, and how do you think these players try to keep their emotions and their battery tank full going into this, which is an exciting time, but also 7, 8 months in?
Yeah, you make a great point. It is a long season. I always feel like up until the US Open, you're going to like after the US Open, it's the Wild West. People it, I feel like that's when the battery really starts to deplete. Now you'll see it, but I think different people have different parts of year that they really enjoy and they play better. And that for me was a huge thing. I knew from, let's call it Wimbledon through the US Open and a little bit into September, that was my best time of year. And when you have results early on in your career at certain spots, you have those good feelings, both physically, mentally, you it, you're able to withstand some of the ups and downs. I was talking about it. I think I was talking about it with Bjorn Fritangelo not too long ago, good buddy of mine on tour. And I always actually struggled going to Australia sometimes where I didn't feel like I had enough time. And that was where you'd had 6 weeks in the off season, but the off season was so short, you didn't really have time to reset after the season. And I loved Australia, but I remember towards the end of my career getting on that plane, being like, oh, here we go again. Whereas sometimes you get to Wimbledon and you might have 3 or 4 days off, but you turn around and you're
Yeah.
going Newport, you're going Atlanta is no longer on the calendar. I know Newport's a challenger now, but DC, Canada,
Right.
Cincinnati, US Open, great events that I did well at. And so it was easier for me to get up for those. Some people, maybe that's their clay season, and this is a little bit of a drag. I just think with so many events throughout the year, different players have different peaks and valleys.
I agree, and I think, I mean, say it again, hundred millionth time, but the big three spoiling us that we just assumed that okay, players can just do well every time of the year, every surface. I think we're kind of reverting a little bit back to how it has been and how it will be for the majority of pro tennis players. You have, as you say, your peaks and valleys, and we've seen it this year, right? Players that have had maybe brutal clay seasons tear it up on the grass, or vice versa, or hanging on to clay like we're going to get to, where players are still out there playing. I do think that just because you might have a lull in the season, or whether it's surface or part of the year time zone, you're still able to have success. Really, player, and that's a testament to you guys and girls as tennis players to be able to flip the page on a bad part of the year and just make it positive.
The beauty of tennis is there's always another week. It's
Yeah,
also the downfall. You win an event on Sunday and you could have lost your next match on Tuesday. The tour continues to go
yeah,
on. You have no time to celebrate the wins, but you also don't have time to get down on the losses because to your point, if you do, the season can continue to snowball and spiral out of control. I think that's the great part about the sport. You have 5 days, you put it beside you, you get back
hmm,
out there, and there's another opportunity to rewrite your script for the season. And 1 week can turn around a season.
yeah,
1 week can make a career. We've seen that multiple times. I think a perfect recent example is Louis Buisson at Roland Garros this year, outside 350 makes a semifinals, a wild card, all of a sudden the
yeah,
schedule completely changes.
yeah,
Now you have to go and continue to prove that. And the calendar, the ranking system is a 12-month rolling calendar. Those
yeah.
points will roll off, but you've set yourself up and given yourself an opportunity to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and she went and won that clay title after Wimbledon, so she's flying. That's a great example there. I agree with you. Although we just saw the Citi Open, and we saw a player that is going to have a little tougher time shaking some stuff off. Want to get to that men's final first, and then the women's. But it was Alex de Minaur winning the Citi Open over Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, 3 sets. It was another situation where Fokina was in position, had a chance, had played such beautiful tennis, beating Fritz, beating Shelton, and then falling to de Minaur in 3 tight sets, a third set tiebreaker. From the de Minaur perspective, Bradley, and we'll get into all the baggage with Fokina, but I just thought going into it, and even as the match is progressing, there might not be a worse player if you're on the other side of the net to play if you have to get to that finish line than de Minaur, because he just fights, he battles, he takes it point by point. He wasn't going to give you anything, and he stayed in the fight. That's the best thing I can say, is he just stayed in the fight and was rewarded for it.
De Minaur has so many impressive qualities as a tennis player, but that ability to stay in the fight and his mentality, his competitiveness, point in, point out, has to be at the top of the list for him. And you're right,
Mhm.
if you're Davidovich Fokina, he's the last guy that you want to see. Okay, outside of your
Oh yeah,
Sinner,
yeah.
Alcaraz, but when you're trying to get your first title, and what we can get into the demons that he's, no pun intended there,
Hmm.
he's had in finals previously. de Minaur has had success. I believe he's made a DC final at least once before. He's had a lot of success in Atlanta. He's no stranger to these summer hard courts in the US, and he's a guy that the heat doesn't affect him. The conditions, we know how swampy DC can get at this time of year. It's rough. He continues to impress me year after year. I still forget how young he is. He seems like he's been out on tour. I remember playing him in 2019 a couple times, and just uh, having no answers, nowhere to go. Um, and I believe at that point he was still a teenager, and he still has a lot of runway.
Yeah.
He continues to develop each year, and yeah, it's I guess just another
Uh,
case of Demonar being Demonar.
so in saying that, I do agree. I also think he was a little banged up for Wimbledon, which may help him now. He may be a little more fresh than maybe he would have been coming off a longer grass season. Also fair to say the draw did kind of open up for him with some of the players being knocked out. We saw Medvedev and some other big seeds go down, and Fokina taking out those Americans on his way. But yeah, I mean, de Minaur, an all-surface player who's continually added to his game, which is hard to do at the pro level. He's up to number 8 in the world. For Fokina, Bradley, and again, this is somebody that's made 3 finals this year, playing some of the best tennis. He's in the top 20. Here's the gift and the curse, right? He is clearly the best player, the highest ranked player without a title. 3 finals this year, 2 of which he had 5-2 leads in the third set, had multiple match points, but just can't get across the finish line. And whether it's how he's played, whether it's certain situations of just bad luck or misfortune, what the other guy across the net's doing, this is because you live this life, Bradley. It has to add up. This is a cumulative thing. When you haven't gotten to the finish line, the scar tissue, as they say, can be pretty big.
You know, he so this is the third final he's played in this year. Acapulco, straight sets, not much of an opportunity there, but Delray Beach, brutal. I mean, the match points he played there. I forget at what point in the game when he had the match point
Five. It
against
was so it was
Kecmanovic. It was
5-2,
5-2.
and
And
Kekmanovich's serve 15-40. Yeah,
okay, it was the 15. I don't remember if it
yeah,
was the 15-40 or the
yeah.
30-40 point,
Oh,
but they played that long rally. Kecmanovic going side to side. And when you play a point like that, it kind of reminded me of that point he put on match point last night. De Minaur hits that sky high lob. Davidovich Fokina, I mean, rushed a little bit to get into that, but really didn't play the point poorly. And that scar tissue then starts to come in, where it's like I've already had this situation once earlier this year. Play the point the right way. And it's hard. We've seen him go a little chaotic when he hasn't had those opportunities. I was thinking as well, I believe it was 1 or 2 years ago when he played Runa at Wimbledon I think it was the third round, and he was up big in the fifth set tiebreak and lost a point, got a little crazy in the head, tries an underhand serve, ends up falling apart. And it's a little bit of a theme, just hasn't been able to get over the finish line in some of these bigger matches. The good news for him, he has the talent on all surfaces. He's made a Monte Carlo final. He can play on grass. He's effective. So he's giving himself multiple opportunities, and he's into the top 20 for the first time this year, or for his career after this result. Can he use that? Can he fall back on that, or does his mind go to match points and
Right.
multiple finals?
It's the $1 million question. You don't beat Fritz and Shelton in back-to-back nights without having serious game and doing so much well. And maybe a positive is after Del Rey losing to Kekmanovic, he started to play good. He didn't sulk either, so maybe he's able to keep that going. It just shows you tennis, right? Because against Fritz, I was watching that match where Fritz is 30-love up, 2 points away. Fokina plays free, gets some fortune, and that's part of it too. So I'm with you. I think that there's a level for him to go. He's proven it on all surfaces. It just was brutal. And I thought, I mean, De Minaur handling it as classy as you can, consoling him after, saying that look, I got a little lucky. And that's part of it, is admitting, look, I played well. I stayed in the fight, as we said, but the breaks just happened to go his way.
Yeah, a lot of tennis is just keeping yourself around long enough, right? We
Hmm.
know this sport can be fickle at
Hmm.
times. The let cord, that lob on the line, a gust of wind
Yeah.
blows that out by an inch.
Yeah.
The margins are so thin at the top of the game. And so much of this sport is doing what you can, putting yourself in the best position, and then trusting that not everything's in your control. You
Right.
have an opponent across the net, De Minaur and Davidovich Fokina, who was playing an excellent tennis match,
Mhm.
got a little unlucky there. How many times have you know, been on the right side of a lucky break and the wrong side of the lucky break?
Yeah.
Davidovich Fokina easily could have been out a couple rounds ago against Fritz down in that third set.
It was a tremendous DC. It had a lot of everything on the American front, those players that we mentioned, Bradley. Any thoughts, any cause for concern, or anything positive or negative you saw from those guys? Fritz wasn't able to get through. Seemed like he, was physically feeling it as that match went on against Fokina. You saw Shelton play very well against Tiafoe, but didn't quite have it the next day against Fokina. Any thoughts on what the American men looked like as they look to ramp up their hard court campaigns here?
Yeah, I don't put a whole lot of thought into this. Is really the first week for them on the hard courts. You had Los Cabos last
Hmm.
week. It was pretty. I mean, I know you had Rublev there, but overall, I think this is a broader storyline as you've seen some of the 250s, especially this time of year,
Yeah.
pretty weak. And with that comes a lot of opportunity for players outside of the top 10, top 20 to get some wins. So for the first week back on the hard courts, it's great. These guys were able to come in, get some wins. Fritz makes a quarter. I know that's not up to his standards. Where he is, he feels he should be winning these, and rightfully so. And also
Hmm.
for Ben, but both those players rise to the occasion in the bigger events. I
Yeah.
think none more so than Ben, who we've seen time and time again. Not to say that these results don't matter at the 250s
Right.
or 500s for him, but he's a guy that I know is going to show up when the
Hmm.
lights are brightest, and
Yeah.
he's going to be in the second week. And for him to already establish that reputation this early in his career is really, really impressive. So I don't put a lot of stock into it. I'm interested to see these next couple weeks how the players handle this shift to now 3 weeks over Canada
Hmm.
and Cincinnati, as opposed to that sprint, right? Canada, Cincinnati, 1 week each. It really felt like
Hmm.
you're running the 100-yard dash through those events, and you had a lot of tennis. And now, as we see these formats expand, how do the players manage? Because you have the previous 6 months, 6.5, 7 months of road work built up.
Right.
And now you've got this cherry on top, especially for the Americans, the US Open.
Yeah.
Fritz is defending a final. He wants to go one further. Tiafoe's a player who has always risen to the occasion there. So we'll see a lot over these next couple of weeks, but ultimately,
Yeah.
I think the North American summer and for the Americans, it's determined by how well they do in New York.
Right. You definitely want to ramp up. You don't want to be one and done in these tournaments, but it's all about the end goal, and the end goal in sight is the U.S. Open. So every event kind of adds some weight. But yeah, it's a new dynamic with the 2 week Masters events, or week and a half, so to speak, which we'll get to in a second. But on the women's front, Bradley, I did want to mention as well, Leylah Fernandez wins the Citi Open. Just slaying giants again. It was really not just the final where she dusted Kalinskaya, but beating Rybakina, coming back, notching some big wins along the way, beats Jessie Pegula in there. This is the best tennis Leylah's played, obviously, since the U.S. Open, and again, someone that's, I think, younger than we all realize. So for Leylah Fernandez with her lefty game, which I know you appreciate, to come out there and get the job done and get the hardware is pretty impressive.
I always like watching left. I love watching her game too. I thought she did such a nice job holding the baseline, looking to move forward. She's fearless coming
Mhm.
into the net and great hands up there. She's
Mhm.
more than capable. And to see her continuing to push the envelope, especially on courts like DC. I always remember DC being some of the quickest courts out there. It pays dividends for the players that are able to move forward, to play attacking tennis, and aren't afraid to take the ball out of the air. You mentioned knocking off Pagula. This actually, I was looking at, I couldn't believe this match was out on John Harris court, the second court in DC. And then you look at the other women's matches that day, and you had Venus Williams and you had Emma Raducanu versus Naomi Osaka. I mean, you want to
Yeah.
talk about star power for the DC Open
Yeah.
this year, and
Yeah.
historically, the names
Yeah.
that they've been able to attract, it's pretty remarkable and awesome for those fans. But back to Fernandez, for her to get through that one
Hmm.
against Pegula, then down a set and a break against Rybakina, down a set and fourth, Rybakina serving 4-3 to fight back, to run away with that tiebreak. And then, sometimes you get that you feel like you've escaped from a match.
Right.
We talk about Minaur escaping against Davidovich Fokina there. Fernandez escaping,
And
for
like you're
lack of a
playing with
better
like house
term.
money a little bit the next match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you go out in the final and you play free. And
Hmm.
Kalinskaya had a great week as well, making the final, really steamrolling through the draw
Hmm.
up until that point. But Fernandez, you get through that match, she clearly recovered well physically. That match on Saturday was over 3 hours in the heat to come back and not even really need to tap into that endurance, because she blitzed through Kalinskaya. It was really impressive and got her
Yeah.
her biggest title.
Kalinskaya is another one, doesn't have a title on the tour level, so you wonder if those nerves, if not having the experience, is going to play in, which it certainly will until she gets the title at the WTA level. The note on Fernandez that I have in looking back, and you brought up something I was thinking of just now, Bradley, is that she's never been afraid. Like, she's been inconsistent at times, but there's no fear about playing the top players. And people can say that. You could say, I want to play the best. I'm not afraid. But the proof is in the pudding. She has knocked off some of the biggest names in the sport. I think that's a rare quality. If anything, what she has to work on is being consistent, week in, week out, getting deeper into tournaments, because when she gets there, she's proven she can win.
Yeah, it's interesting in how the tour is set up. You are rewarded more so if you're a little bit more chaotic,
Hmm.
but you win some of the bigger events. The way the point structure is, and it takes a different mentality as well to be able to be that resilient that you can brush off a couple losses. You take a couple first round losses and still have the confidence and the trust in your game to continue to go for it. And she has that trust. She has that ability to continue moving forward, that no fear that you mentioned against these top players. And then you get a week like this. Now you're going and you're playing back in your home country this week.
Hmm.
There's a lot of momentum to be built.
Big week. She's got the title, home country's got a date coming up. Everything,
Yeah.
everything's
You
good.
know, I think too, I wanted to shout out Taylor
Yeah.
Townsend as well for winning the
Number one.
doubles and becoming
Yeah.
world number one in doubles, and
Yeah.
also making the quarterfinals of singles in
Hmm.
DC. She's incredibly talented, both on the singles and the doubles court. And I think that her singles doesn't get enough credit. Obviously, she
Right.
is
Right.
the best doubles player in the world right now, but it's an incredible week for her.
I completely agree. I think what she does at singles is underrated, and how she has such good net. It's a different type of way to play. I think it catches a lot of these ladies off guard. How she plays, how great her hands are. But I also too think, Bradley, she could be great for the game of doubles. To have a player and a personality like her at the top of the game, I think is. I mean, I don't want to get into the big doubles debates that we could get into, but I just think it could be great for doubles to have her as the face of it.
Totally. Doubles needs you need a face that can carry, that has the personality, that's able to move the sport. You think about what Bob and Mike Bryan did for doubles, and really, to my understanding, saved it in a way from um, other possibilities. So to continue to have great personalities who are successful on the court, but also can bring people in
Yeah.
off the court, uh, it, that's how it's going to continue to promote doubles.
We got more with Bradley Klahn here on the Inside In Tennis podcast. We're talking about all things tennis going into the hard court swing as we're starting the Cincinnati or starting the Canadian Open, followed by Cincinnati, then the U.S. Open. It's going to be a great time to be a tennis fan, especially here in North America. Other news and notes as we move along this, and I can't not mention, Bradley, it was really cool to see Venus Williams out there, not just playing, but winning a match, beating Peyton Stearns. Now she has a wild card into Cincinnati. We think the U.S. Open, we assume that's going to be the next stop, but 45 years old. I mean, one pro matches before pretty much a lot of these players were even alive, and still doing it for the love of the game. That's what I keep coming back to. She just loves tennis, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
I've heard this from others far smarter in tennis than I have, but I think it holds true. Is count the greats out at your own peril, and I think that applies to Venus as well. Continuing to just push the limits. Not playing a match since Miami of last year. I also think, if you're Peyton Stearns, how nervous are you stepping across the net, playing
Yeah.
Venus, playing a legend on the tour, in her first match back? You know, I love the honesty from Venus after the match.
Yeah.
Like, why is she coming back? And talking about insurance, I just cracked me up, especially what I'm doing now in the finance world.
Yeah.
It was funny to see, and she had another one with a great personality. And look, tennis is better off if she continues to try and
Hmm.
extend her career as long as she wants. Playing in Cincinnati,
Yeah.
she's going to draw a crowd there. U.S. Open, look, if she's proven too, I mean, she's still competitive. Won
I
a
know.
doubles match as well. She played 4 matches this week.
She did. It was, it was smart too. Like she obviously limitations, 45 years old, you're not going to move the way you did, but I thought her strategy was pretty smart. And yeah, playing into the nerves. It's got to be something also to get like very little crowd support in America as an American. So that's a unique experience too. But no, it's and you want to appreciate the opportunities to see these legends, these living legends while they're out there. So it was great. Wanted to give her a shout out. Wanted to also discuss some of the coaching and team changes that we've seen. Naomi Osaka fell in the matchup Bradley to Mouratoglou, who looked great in DC up to the semifinals. But for Osaka, it was that loss compounded with the decision that she's going to end the 10-month partnership with Coach Patrick Mouratoglou. Wished him the best. Everything was cordial on the way out. But it posed the question, we weren't really surprised by this, Bradley, that the change came. But I wonder for someone in Osaka's position, four-time major champion, number one, surefire Hall of Famer, what do you think she needs, and what do you think the next step could be on her path to try to get back to the top of the game?
She seems like she's searching for answers right now, and a lot of what I hear is just struggling with those. She's a 4-time major champion. She knows what it feels like, what it's like to be world number one, to win majors, and to have to reset. And she's a mother. There's the additional responsibilities that come with tennis not being the only priority now as well, and then having to reset your expectations. I, I was I give her a lot of credit and so much respect for going back and winning a challenger, and understanding that, hey, this is where I'm at right now. I need to go win matches, and not having the ego to say, like, I'm not going to go down there and play that. play a challenger, to go down there and to actually gut out a couple
Yeah.
three setters and come through. I think that says a lot about her. Unfortunately, it hasn't, I guess, maybe built some of the momentum that we expected. I think there's still flashes of brilliance in her, but really it's going to come from within. And what, is she able to be where her feet are and continue to progress?
Yeah, the Raducanu match was a little more, not one way traffic, but it was more clear that Raducanu was the better player that day. Prior to that, Bradley, I think she's lost a lot of close matches, maybe dare I say winnable matches. So, yeah, at the end of the day is you can talk about progress, what you're working on, feeling good about your game, but it's pro sports. The object is to win, and she has to just find a way to win.
It's it's black and white
Yeah,
out there in
yeah,
tennis. It's, you can take your moral victories and you can see the progress. And I do think that that is important, especially for her when she's going
yeah,
through a streak where she's not able to kind of get over the hump in some of these matches. But you're right. At the end of the day, you're judged by the
yeah.
wins and losses on tour, and it's so finite, right? We talked about it ad nauseum in the DC men's final, how small the margins are, and how little actually needs to turn. One of those matches goes her way and things start clicking. And I always say, I mean, you're never as good as your best win. You're never as bad as your worst loss. But the difference in those four
Mhm.
all, five all, the match
Yeah,
points is, do you believe you're going to win
yeah,
because you've done it the last few months, last few years, whatever it is? Or are you freezing just the split second in those matches because you haven't gotten over the hump?
yeah.
There's that slight measure of doubt in there that, like, I mean, tennis, it's quick, right? It's not like
Hmm.
you're standing over a golf ball and you can take your time
Hmm.
until, like, you're reacting. You have to make decisions in a split second, and that split second of hesitation can make all the difference.
I'm going to botch the percentage quote, but it's the Paul Anacone line about, I think it's 10, 10, and 10, and then the middle is 80, where 10% of the time you're amazing, 10% you just don't have it, but what you do in that 80 middle is what defines you as a pro. So, I mean,
That's
yeah.
that's the line. And the first one who told me that was Andy Roddick
Yeah.
when I was fortunate to spend a week with him in college over the summer and learned so much from him. But that was the biggest thing I took away was the 80%. That's where you live. The 10%, nobody's gonna touch you. The 10%, you're not gonna touch anyone.
Yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
what do you do the rest of the time?
Yeah. It's a age old question. It's going to keep happening for these players as they try to set their careers up and their seasons up this year. The other coaching news I wanted to mention, not shocking, I don't think. Tsitsipas and Ivanisevic are parting ways, given what had been happened, what had been said. We weren't shocked by this, Bradley, but I think going into the part of Tsitsipas's career that he's at, you wonder where he can go from here, given that his game is unfortunately trended in the wrong direction for quite some time now.
I think first and foremost, he needs to get healthy. I've
Hmm.
seen retirements. He doesn't seem to be fully healthy. He's going through a breakup like that. That all weighs on a player's, not just their mental health, but also the physical health as well. And in order to feel confident in your game, you need to feel confident in your body. And unfortunately, it's something I know all too well is when the body was feeling good, now you feel like you free up and you can play the points on your terms. When you start to worry about the body, is it going to last? Can I make it through this match? When that becomes your sole focus, you're not able to process what's going on court, course correct throughout the match, and then go to the practice court and work on specifics. So I think for him, finding some consistent health and then finding a consistent voice and getting back to his game. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more traditional, one-hander. He plays a little bit with the chip. It's hard because the way the power game has gone, headlined with Alcaraz and Sinner, they're able to find the backhand and go through there with pace, and he struggled with that. And it's this compounding effect where the more he struggles, the more he starts to stress about what am I doing on the backhand side. We've seen it on the backhand return. I mean, now guys just, you want to hit a second serve, little bunny kick out to the backhand and either get an air or a weak reply. And I just see him searching on that side. And
Mhm.
once you start to lose confidence there, it's translating to the rest of his game. I think for him, he's so athletic. He has so many weapons with the serve and the forehand. The serve can be a little bit erratic, but when it's on, it's a weapon.
Yeah,
And he needs to get back to relying on that and having confidence there. And
yeah,
I think sometimes can get a little bit too caught up on the weaknesses and
yeah.
really trying to bring those up and lose sight of what actually makes, in his case, in Tsitsipas's case himself, what actually makes him a great tennis player. He got to French Open finals not because his backhand was Dominic Thiem, Stan Wawrinka whipping Rinners from the back of the court. It was because he was using it to move the ball around and he was controlling the middle of the court with the forehand.
It's completely different given what's been accomplished on her end, but you saying that made me think of Coco Gauff, right? You malign the weaknesses so much, you
Mhm.
forget, okay, there's really world-class qualities here.
It's a great example, just on the other
Yeah,
wing, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so perfect because you know how many times have we heard about the serve and the forehand of Coco Gauff, but we forget that she's world class on the backhand. She moves around the court better than anyone else on tour right now, and I have to say she's one of, if not the best competitor.
Yeah.
I think it was on display at the French or at
Hmm.
Roland Garros this year,
Yeah.
how she was able to
Yeah.
adjust the conditions and take that match from Sabalenka. And it goes back to what we said. It's black and white on tour. It's wins and losses.
Yeah.
We talk about how players, how are they improving in their game? They need, the X's and the O's. They need to do this and that. But ultimately, your job out there is to find a way to win the match.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
Coco Gauff does that as well as anyone out there.
Yeah. We'll see her in Canada, and I want to get to that. But first, mentioning that there were still clay court events, finishing up the official end of clay season. It was a repeat. Darderi and Bublik winning titles for 2 straight weeks, which Bradley is insane to win multiple titles. To win multiple titles in a season's great, but to do it back to back weeks and have two guys do it, I'd have to scratch my head to think when that's happened. But I guess when you're hot, you're hot.
What a turnaround for Bublik.
Yeah.
There's something in Vegas about going there
Hmm.
after Indian Wells, and I was looking at his stats at 33-9 since that Indian Wells loss after starting. I believe it was 2-8 to start the year, 17-2 since Roland Garros.
Do you think that
He's hot.
do you think that because a lot's been made? I mean, obviously the attitude's there. He's digging into matches. He's not giving up necessarily in them. The equipment change, right? Switching to a different racket. As someone that's lived it, I want to know, do you think it might even be a little placebo effect? Like just the idea of changing and getting confidence is helping him too.
There's certainly a case to be made for that, right? I
Hmm.
think sometimes when you're stuck in a rut, you just need a change, whether it's moving your training base to a new
Yeah,
place for a week. This is something that I didn't do enough, but I did it at the end of my career and was amazed at just the small effects and how I felt
yeah,
physically, let alone for performance, whether it's a racket. Matty Keys is another example that actually made a huge difference in her game. There was no placebo effect there, just in the way she was able to
yeah,
control the ball. But there's something to be said for making a change and not going down the same rabbit hole of, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing and
yeah.
expecting different results. Being open to change. We're not always great about that as tennis players, but I think it's hard for me to say whether it's like made a material difference in his game or
Right.
it helps the head, but
Yeah.
I think it's hard to separate the two.
It's a spark, and that's what you're saying. Like sometimes players are just looking for something to ignite them, a spark to get them going, and it's a combination of a lot of things, I'm sure. But yeah, it's Bublik being great at clay now is just one of the bigger zags that I could not have seen coming. So we love to be on our toes and see things we're not expecting in sports. So that's awesome.
You're always going to get that with Bublik. He is very refreshing to have out there on tour. I was looking at this. Only three players have more than two titles on the men's tour this year. Alcaraz
Hmm.
makes sense. Darderi and Bublik. Who had that in their bingo card at the start of the year?
Yeah, it's crazy, crazy to see, but we love it. We love it, and we're going to move on here on the Inside in Tennis podcast to the Canadian Open. Finish up talking about the opportunity north of the border, where you've got action, men in Toronto, women in Montreal, and like how they split it up, giving the city, different cities, the opportunity to see pro tennis each year. On the men's side, Bradley, we talked about the players last week that pulled out of the event. A lot of star power not there. Still some very good players, but you look at the seeds, you look at a guy like Zverev coming in, Shelton and Fritz are going to be seeded highly, other players as well. Who on the men's side are you looking at to maybe take advantage of the opportunity? Who maybe needs a big result? And who do you think can have a great success in Canada?
I'll start with who needs a big result, and that's looking at the very top of the draw. Alex Zverev. He's been seeded one a lot this year due to the Sinner suspension. He was not able to take advantage of that in Indian Wells and Miami. It's been a really challenging year for him. And you want to talk about coaching changes. We
Mhm.
talked about Tsitsipas and Goran. Zverev bringing on Tony Nadal. I don't know. We'll see how much or what kind of role he has on Team Zverev, if it's traveling, if it's going to Mallorca and just having that guidance. But it cannot be a bad thing when
No.
you have Tony Nadal and also Rafael Nadal, I'm sure, in your ear trying to help you through some of these challenges. So I look for him to have a big result. I think there is a tremendous opportunity across the draw. Last year, you saw it was right after the Olympics. It really thinned out, not necessarily in terms of people showing up, but just the results weren't what we're used to seeing for a smaller Masters 1000. You saw Popperin come through and win the title. Does he think he can come here and repeat?
Mm.
No, I think what's also interesting is he won the title in Montreal. You go back to the
Yeah, it's
same
different.
city. Now you're going back to a different city. Still the Canadian Open. You're in Toronto this year. Conditions are similar, but there are a few differences. And so, I think opportunity for him, but I look at the Americans, I look at Fritz and Shelton. You're seated two and four. Shelton seated four now because of four of the top six
Yeah.
pulling out. If I'm those two, I'm looking at this as an opportunity to grab a 1000 title. I know Taylor already has one in Indian Wells, but could really go a long way in solidifying,
Yeah.
working his way up. If you're this is me not exactly knowing the numbers on the ranking, but I don't know how close they are to number four right now, for at least for Ben. But
Ben's
you've got
seven, so
two,
he's got
yeah.
opportunity to make up some ground here. But yeah,
Because
Ben
then you
Shelton,
look at a
yeah.
U.S. Open,
Mhm.
are you able to solidify a top four seed at the U.S. Open and
Uh,
avoid Sinner and
yeah,
Alcaraz
because no
until the
Draper,
semis?
because Jack Draper's out. He's five, and he's going to fall. We'd assume based on results. So yeah, there could be. Yeah, that four seed is like, what are the ranking goals that are huge? It's like 4, 8, 32.
Yep.
Getting to those sections depending on where
Yeah.
you are. On this Zverev point, I think it's true. It's like Holger working with Agassi. You don't want to get left in the dust by the top two players. Like something needs to change, or these guys are just going to drive away, and the window may close shut. So part of it is just working
Yeah.
on your game there. And I would add Medvedev into that list. He kind of flamed out, did flame out, had a meltdown losing to Mute. He's
Mhm.
someone that's looking for a spark too. He's won Canada before, but can he discover what made his game special?
Yeah. I know he was talking about a shoulder injury. It seems to be a little bit better, but when you have that long of a period where, for his standards, the downside, he hasn't won a title, if I'm correct, since 2023. Do I have
Yeah,
that accurate?
that's right. Yeah.
And on the clay too, of
At
all
Rome. Yeah.
surfaces. So, you know, they are widening the gap, Alcaraz and Sinner. And if you're that generation that sat between Novak, Rafa, Roger, and then Carlos and Yannick, now you're looking at these guys continuing to push the gap ahead of you, being like, I was waiting here for the big three to finally retire and take my opportunity. And
Yeah.
now you've got these guys who have continued to separate. And the scary thing is they're only going to get better with
Yeah.
time. They're
Hmm.
22 and 23 years old. You also have, or maybe 20, both 23, but you also have Fonseca, who is 18, and I think a few years off from being a real threat
Hmm.
at majors, but is clearly shown that upside ability, knocking off Rublev in
Yeah.
his first main draw
Right.
appearance at a Grand Slam in Australia. You look at Alcaraz won the US Open at 19, but Sinner still took a little bit of time to get in,
Uh-huh.
hovered around 30, 40 for a little while, then
Yeah.
got up between 10 and 20. And so we forget that his progression still took time. He
Yeah.
was around the same ranking that Fonseca is now at the same age.
Yeah.
And look where he is. So now you look at that, and is he someone that could join Sinner and Alcaraz as a big three in a few years' time? Or is it going to be Aruna? Is someone else from the pack? A Medvedev going to turn around his game? Is Fritz going to
Yeah.
continue to elevate, or Shelton? I think Shelton has, of the Americans, maybe the most raw
Hmm.
ability. Fritz has been the
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 guy. Yeah.
flag bearer.
Yeah.
Fritz is a guy who you can never count out. He's always going to be there. And at the end of the year, you look up and you always see, well, who's the
Number
number
one
one
American.
American? It's
Yeah.
Finn Taylor, and his confidence, his mentality on court is unlike anything that I've been around, just in terms of his belief, and it really goes a long way.
Yeah, got other young guys coming up too. Menchik, who won Miami. SoCal is Leonard Tien, who's been playing better too. So there's a lot of faces and a lot of opportunity in Canada. On the women's side, as we wrap up here, you got Iga Swiatek coming back from Wimbledon. How will that look? How will Amanda Anisimova, after that great run but crushing loss in the final, how will she perform? Coco Gauff, Bradley is back in the mix. So a little more star power at the top of the game on the women's side, but still a chance to fire that first shot on the road to the U.S. Open.
Definitely. It certainly helps their case not being as depleted at the top, like the men with the four out of the top six out. No Sabalenka
Yeah.
in Montreal, but you mentioned all those names. Pegula, two-time defending champ. Anisimova made the final last year. So how does she bounce back from that Wimbledon final? And I think it's a lot was made out of that, but we forget that she just came back not too long ago. She played qualifying at Wimbledon last year. And
Yeah.
for her to make the final of Wimbledon, she has really progressed well.
Hmm.
And and also just I think she deserves a lot of credit for taking the break that she needed and
Yeah.
coming back when she was ready. And I think that's shown. So I hope for her case that she's able to draw on this past year of tennis and not
Hmm.
worry about 1 hour of tennis. I know it was, it's your first Grand Slam final. The
Yeah.
lights are brightest there, but there's so much
Hmm.
good for her to take away from Coco Gauff, early exit in Wimbledon. Plenty of time to be fresh and ready to go
Hmm.
here for the North American swing. And you're right. I think with Iga, it'll be interesting to see how she I hate not to say bounces back because she was on such a high after winning her first Wimbledon, but just a couple weeks ago, how quickly does she turn around
Yeah.
and get back on the hard courts? It's, I do think winning Wimbledon, and I know the surface has slowed tremendously over the years, but someone who had struggled there, there's she's had a lot of success on the clay, obviously.
Yeah.
Does she gain a little confidence moving on to some of these quicker courts after winning Wimbledon? And how does that translate? Being able to really lean on the forehand more and with Coach Winfasset, like what's their game plan now for these next couple weeks?
Exciting, and it's dangerous and scary to see an Iga Swiatek with confidence. So we'll see how she looks. Emma Raducanu looked better. There's a lot of factors. It's going to be a fun U.S. Open series on the women's side for sure.
Yeah, it's also, I was thinking a little bit of a changing of the guard for Canadian tennis with a few retirements this
Yeah.
week and Vasek Pospisil and Jeannie Bouchard on the women's side. But some of the young Canadians coming up on both sides, Mbako,
Yeah.
Branstein, who, incredible story there of coming back
Yeah.
from injury and driving as an Uber Eats driver and modeling just to earn some money to
Yeah.
keep herself in tennis. And then over on the men's side, you obviously have FAA and Chapo, but Diallo has really turned heads this year. So
Yeah.
it's a good moment for Canadian tennis
It is.
to pass the torch for a couple of the players that have really carried the flag for the last decade and moving on.
Yeah, for Pospisil, it didn't end the way he wanted to, being banged up. He was plagued by injuries at the end, but still accomplished so much. Davis Cup champ, doubles major champ. And we'll see what happens in his post-tennis career. But given the stuff and how much he cares about the game and trying to help the players, he might be remembered equally or more for what he does outside of the courts. I think that's really cool and impressive to have such a budding impact on the sport.
Definitely.
So Bradley Klahn, this was a blast. Always fun to chat tennis with you. We'll have to do this again soon because the one thing we know about this is the stories and the results keep changing. So all the best, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Mitch, thanks for having me on again.
That was Bradley Klahn. This was the Inside In Tennis podcast. If you like this show, again, we're on all your podcast platforms. Just go to Apple, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon Music, you name it, and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Mitch Michals for full video episodes of this and our entire catalog with our outstanding guests. We're going to be back in a little bit, a couple days. We'll have another episode out, so be on the lookout for that. For Bradley Klahn, I'm Mitch Michals. This was the Inside In Tennis podcast. Thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.